Her dog's name was Frida. And I said, Frida took me to the limits of where she's going to go that I can't go beyond. And so the one thing I did do, though, is when I got to the boundary where I couldn't go any further, I wanted to see if I could get my hand into it. What happened if I would reach into it? Like, would my hand go
Wow.
in? Would I get sucked in? What would happen? Like, she says I can't go, but can I really not go? So I'm really like
Yes.
interested in stuff like this.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we have Chenee Fournier with us. She is an evidence-based medium and an angel and spirit guide channel. She's also had spiritual transformative experiences and shared death experiences. We're going to talk about all the different things that you've gone through, but thank you so much, Chenee, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me and introducing me to your audience.
One thing I love is I get to say this for the very first time and hopefully the last time is what some of my audience won't know yet is we've already spoke, you and I. We had a conversation a little while back, and unfortunately the conversation didn't get saved on my end. So I've apologized for that, and I'm really excited to actually dig in further and talk again about what's happened to you. We're going to start the same way, and I start all my conversations the same way, and I bring people to their beginning of their life, childhood. Some people skip over that and go into teenage years, but wherever it started, I like to look at little Shanae, when things began, who you were as a child, and if you look at the life you're living now and what you do now, if there was a commonality of interest back then.
Definitely a highly sensitive child. I was one of those children that always wanted to know why this, why that. If anything hurt my feelings, it hurt my feelings deeply. I didn't like to see others get made fun of. I didn't like to see any kind of violence or anything like that. So by the time I was not even 5, I actually experienced the physical transition of my favorite grandfather. Before I was even 11, I experienced the physical transition of my favorite grandmother. Around maybe 2 or 3 years later, I experienced the physical transition of my childhood dog. And then at 17 years of age, I experienced the physical transition and, physical loss of a dear friend from high school who was only 18 when he made his transition.
Wow.
So when you have that much physical death around you, and you're a highly sensitive child, it does leave you with lots of questions. In addition to that, at about 11 years of age, 10 or 11, I'm not sure exactly between those two ages, I had a situation where kids at school said that if we had certain products in our house by a specific corporation, that we were already marked by the devil and we were doomed, all of us, to die and go to hell, like anyone who had these products in their home. So, of course, I
Wow.
go home, I open up the cabinets, and I'm like, oh my goodness, we have these products. Talk to my mom and dad about it. And of course, there's no truth behind that. But as a kid, 10 or 11 years old, you worry about that.
Right.
So I went deeply down that hole of worrying about that, so much so that I would try my hardest not to fall asleep at night. Because I thought, well, if I fall asleep at night, I might accidentally swear away my soul and then go to hell for all of eternity. And it's really interesting because I did not grow up in a religious household. So we weren't taught about hell and damnation, which I'm really grateful we weren't taught about that. But what I found out later on, much later on in life, through doing some past life regression meditations, was that I had had a previous lifetime thousands of years ago where I was either some sort of a folk healer or an energy healer, but I was dubbed a witch or something like that. And as you know, during various time periods, people who were named that or called that were killed violently.
Mm.
And while you're being killed for something like that, usually things that are horrible are yelled at you, calling you evil, saying you're doing the devil's work, or what have you. So, in retrospect, years later, I realized that's why I went so deeply down that hole of fear. Was it was a trigger from something carried over from a previous lifetime. So, thankfully, in this lifetime, that's now been cleared out because also years later, I had found my way to studying Buddhism, and there is a meditation called the loving kindness meditation. And so, first, you're sitting in meditation and you radiate the love to the people who are closest to you and that you know and love. Then you radiate it out to acquaintances. Then you radiate it out to the general public. And then you radiate it out even to people who you really don't resonate with and who you would quote unquote not like and not agree with. So during that time period, I thought, well, okay, I grew out of even believing in the devil. And I've come to be shown that there is no evil, there is no devil, there is no hell. But at that time period, there was still some little residual fear left over. So I thought, okay, well, I don't really believe in the devil, but why don't I just sit down in loving kindness meditation and invite this so called being to sit in meditation and to have love flowing towards it? And for this being to recognize, okay, you are racking up a bunch of negative karma based on the teaching of Buddhism. So perhaps I can switch this around a bit. Perhaps I can help clear out some negative karma. Perhaps I can hold the space for miracles to happen. So after that particular meditation finished, I realized, oh, okay, I am so far beyond that fear now and so completely out of that fear now that I'm able to then move through my life in a way that feels relatively fearless. I have no fear whatsoever of anything in the spirit world because I've already gone through my dark night of the self. Like we spoke about last time, Cynthia Bourgeot, who is a mystical teacher, she talks about there's the dark night of the soul and the dark night of the self. And she really prefers to use the terminology dark night of the self because I've also been shown that the soul is completely indestructible. It is perfect, it is whole, it is holy. It does go through evolution, but it is indestructible. So for me, that's why the dark night of the self is a terminology that works better for me. But so I went through so much in early childhood and internalized a lot of it because I was a very sensitive child and just kind of kept quiet about certain things. My parents, they did know when I first became afraid, but then when I realized that it was lingering, and it took a number of years to get completely out of it, they didn't know that because I just kept it inside. I think those of us that are highly sensitive, we experience things deeper than others do. And sometimes we really turn inward to try to fix it for ourselves because we kind of maybe feel a bit like a failure if we need others to help us fix it. I'm not sure, that isn't necessarily the case for everyone, but it is for me. So that led me on my lifelong gorgeous journey of studying all sorts of different spiritual philosophies, spiritual traditions. Always I've been drawn to the mystical side of things. And so who I am today, all these years later, those seeds were planted not only in early life for me in very early childhood, but in previous lifetimes. I've also been able to see spirits since early childhood. Luckily, that never scared me because the beings, interestingly enough, would always be standing either in my doorway or just outside my doorway and just watching over me. So I could see them and I could see through them and I could see the door beyond them. But of course, as a child, you don't know that that's not normal
Mm-hmm.
until you maybe get older and start talking to other people and you share your experiences. And they're like, no, we didn't have that happen. So I didn't
Right.
feel unusual, thankfully. But so, yeah, so this is something that's just been kind of like a thread all throughout my life, being able to tap into other dimensions, being able to bring information in from other dimensions, and coming to my own belief systems and things that work for me because of trial and error, because of learning about all sorts of different philosophies and spiritual traditions, and coming up with what resonates with me at a soul level.
Wow. So basically, thanks for sharing that. So you started with that as a child. You also mentioned, see, a couple things came back from our first conversation. I
Uh-huh.
recall you saying, and one of them is that you did see spirit as a child, that you would see them. And it's interesting when you just said that, you later on found out that wasn't just, Benny down the street wasn't having the same experience. Some of them maybe some. Obviously, I talked to a lot of people who did have some experiences. They just didn't talk about it till later. But I used to close my eyes when I was a kid. With my mom, I'd be, my mom had separated, and I'd be always sleeping in her bed with her because, she was single at the time, and I'd close my eyes and she'd ask me questions. And I'd say, "Oh, I see," and I name someone we know, and I'd see colors around them And I'd say, oh, I see their face and I see colors coming from them. And so then she'd say, well, what about this person? And my mom was always interested in spirituality. She didn't really have a religion herself. So she was kind of um, just asking curious questions to me because I was only about 6 years old and I was kind of telling her these things. So I would practice that every night. I'd close my eyes, I'd see these people, I'd see colors around them. And I thought this was normal. I thought that was part of what you do when you hit 6 years old or whatever. It's just what you do. And I can recall being at school a few years, later as the time goes on and mentioning it to my friends, when you close your eyes, you can picture someone and see this color that resonates around them and they kind of were like, what are you talking about, Joe? Right. And I said, yeah, like that's what everyone does. Um, and so once I realized, nope, that's not what people do. That's weird. In fact, that's what they would say. I shut it down, and
Oh, true.
I closed it right down. I thought, well, I'm not going to do that because that means something's wrong with me. So I stopped
Mm,
doing it. And even though that's different than actually seeing spirit like yourself, it still is in that same category. I was doing something that was a little bit out of the ordinary, and I was tuning into possibly something that wasn't typical, right? I was almost
right.
having, and I always recall that when people tell me things about what they went through and then find out later it wasn't typical, let's call it. But when you had these experiences, did you know in those instances that these were people that had passed on?
No, not necessarily. I didn't even wonder why they were see-through. You would think that as a child, looking out the doorway and seeing someone who's basically translucent, you
Hmm.
would wonder why you could see through them. But for some reason, it just didn't seem odd. And they never felt menacing. There was never a situation where I thought, oh my goodness, I want this to stop. It didn't feel that way at all. I did, however, though, find out many years later. It's interesting how many things I found out over the years. But I found out many years later that my mom has this ability too. When she was a child, she has a story. I think she wasn't even a teenager yet. She has a story of sitting with her, I don't know, great grandma. I'm not sure who it was that was transitioning. And she saw her loved one get up out of bed, but also stay in bed, right? So it was like two versions of them. So
Hmm.
she saw the spirit get up, walk around the bed, and then get back into the body that was lying on the bed. And I asked my mom, did that scare you? And she said, no, I don't know why it didn't, but it didn't scare me. And yeah, now that I'm telling the story, I do recall she was not even a teenager yet. So she was also very young. So I believe that we are all born with this ability and we all come in sensitive like this to being able to see things in spirit. Watch any baby, watch any young person many times, and you can see them. Unfortunately, the parents will just sometimes tell them, oh, that's an imaginary friend, when no, it's not. They're most likely seeing a being in spirit. So I don't say that this is a gift that I have, but I do think that because my mom had this ability as well, maybe I came in a little bit more attuned to it than if she hadn't had that ability and been aware of it as well.
Yeah, and I believe a lot of us when we're younger, because we're closer to that side, we go through this life and we get further and further away from that side, we start to lose touch at times of what we've come from. And I had a great guy on the other day. He's well known in the near-death experience community, Ishtar. He goes by
Mm,
his, yeah, you may have seen videos on him, but he was explaining his near-death experience, and then he recalled being a child, being in his crib, and he'd always have parents come in and lay on the bed beside his crib or family members. And one particular evening, like a grandmother or some woman came in and walked up to the crib, and he's looking at this person, and then the person continued to walk through the crib, through the wall, and out the door,
yeah,
just on the other side. And he can recall it, thinking, "Oh, that was odd." And then he said, and what was even odder was that there was like this translucent, almost like bluish tinge, translucent look that he tried to explain. Again, we're using human terms, so we're trying to explain it.
right.
But he recalled that, and so then he realized later on at looking at pictures that was a great grandmother or something. It was something around that.
Oh, okay.
So I found that fascinating. And again, he just has good memory of that age where I think a lot of us lose that memory. The memory kind of gets lost. Like I can remember a few things from before age 3, but it's very like minor. It's
Yeah.
very small amounts. So I think if we all had that ability of having memory at like 3 months old, we may be living in a completely tropical world filled of spirits flying through the room, and like who knows? Like but how many people really recall that? It's very, very a low amount of people. So the fact that you have memories even as you got older in childhood of seeing this. And so, okay, so you have those experiences. You had a lot of loss. So that makes sense. A lot of people who don't have a lot of loss maybe aren't in tune with what they're looking for, but you have loss. So maybe your subconscious was kind of wondering, well, what happens to these people when they transition or they pass away? Like maybe you weren't thinking about it, but maybe a part of you was aware that you had loss. So maybe you were in tune, more in tune. I don't know. I'm listening to your story this time for the second time and trying to kind of understand why you would be seeing these things as some people don't, right? Um,
Right.
I don't know. Have you ever thought about that? Maybe it's because of the amount of loss.
It could be because of the amount of loss. It could also be, I'm wondering if those of us that fall under the category of highly sensitive people, highly sensitive person, if even more of us have this ability than someone who doesn't fall under that
Mm.
category. I'm not sure. And I don't know if anything like that has ever been studied. But certainly, having that much loss as a young person, it makes you question a lot. I even
Mhm.
recall, I don't remember where in my age this falls, but it was definitely probably 6 or 7 years old, if not younger, thinking about the concept of eternity and basically almost freaking myself out because I remember thinking, wow, that's a really long time. So whether I'm eternally happy or eternally unhappy, that's a really long time. And I would like that, I could freak myself out on. So the beings in spirit never freaked me out. I also used to walk and talk a lot in my sleep, but I realize now these aren't words that I would have used back then because I was a kid. I don't think I was just randomly walking and talking in my sleep. I think I was actually interacting with beings in spirit in my
Mm.
sleep, but yet the physical body is supposed to have sleep paralysis go on so that you don't
Right.
get up and walk around in your sleep. For some reason, that was being overridden, and I was sleep talking and sleepwalking. And to others listening to me, it would sound like babble. It would sound like it didn't make any sense. But yeah, in retrospect, I realized that was probably just me interacting with beings in spirit during that time. And the body didn't stay paralyzed like it was supposed to when you're sleeping.
Wow. I've
Yeah.
never thought of that.
Yeah.
I have some family members who've had sleepwalking issues. Even my own sister used to just knock on the door and you'd open the door and she's just sitting there and you'd freak me right out because I'm like, what are you doing? Go back to bed. This is weird. Um, I, but I was a sensitive kid. I'm still a sensitive person. I have a lot of sensitivities. That's why I use music. But see, maybe music harnessed me in. Maybe it kept me kind of grounded and let me kind of express, and I didn't kind of go down that idea. And opposite to you, I didn't think of eternity. What happened to me was in my teenage years, I saw a movie that triggered me to think, oh, there is an end. There's an
Mm,
actual end. So I got kind of fixated on the physical and not having any belief system growing up. I didn't go to church. I didn't really have anything like that. So I didn't even really have a concept of what a God really was. I kind of did. I prayed every night, but I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't really
right.
understand what I was praying to. I just knew I would pray and be nice to God, and maybe God would be nice to me. That was kind of like my thought process. And but I had this thought of not eternity. I thought of just the end, and it
Um,
sent me into a good amount of years in my teenage years where I just had a lot of fear around what happens. And it didn't take until I started researching near-death experiences and
okay.
getting books at the library. And while everybody else was getting books on like basketball players and stuff, I'm sitting there with you know, afterlife communications and near-death experience books. And of course, the internet was just kind of picking up. And
Right.
so I'm trying to find as much information. So, but the idea of eternity to me sounds great as long as there is a sort of grand purpose to our existence in growth, I would say. And I think majority of people that I've interviewed that have had out of body and near death experiences would agree that there is an eternal part of us that never ceases to exist. Energy can't be destroyed, and we're partly energy, right? So there's something there with that. What I was going to ask you, because you had this loss, is this where this shared death experience came up, or was this something later on in your life that occurred?
That was later on in life. I have always been someone who, for whatever reason, after I got out of the fear of dying and going to hell, was very comfortable with the concept of death. I've never had suicidal ideation or anything like that. But through all of my different spiritual journeying and learning about all the different philosophies, I came to just see what a beautiful sort of, I don't even know how to, it's hard to find words. Like all of this is just so beautiful if we let it be beautiful as far as what comes after this, that this is just like a blip in time called the human life. Um, and I've lost train of thought. What was your
Okay, it was around the
question?
shared death experience
Oh,
that you
shared
had.
death. Okay,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So I actually spent like 4 years working, volunteering. I was a volunteer with hospice for 4 years. And I have a Reiki master certification. And so I was doing Reiki with hospice patients. Then, when I found out that there was the opportunity to sit visual with people as they were making their physical transitions, maybe they didn't have family, or maybe their families were too far away and couldn't get there in time, we would be there and sit with them during that transition.
Wow.
So there were times during those years where I was able to experience shared death. And with one really meaningful one, this was actually with my sister's dog. And it was interesting because it was a shared death, but yet before it happened. So her dog had been going through some health issues. And that particular morning, the morning that she did finally have to euthanize the sweet dog, when the phone rang, I didn't want to say to her, I know today's the day, because I didn't want to sway her opinion. But when she said today's the day, I said, okay, I know. And I know why. Because her dog's name was Frida. And I said, Frida took me to the limits of where she's going to go that I can't go beyond. And so she showed me this beautiful field of light, and beyond it was just absolutely gorgeous. And so she showed me that that's where she was going to go, because a soul is a soul. It doesn't matter. What I've been shown is it doesn't matter if it's the soul of a person or a soul of a tree or a soul of a dog. Everything is soul, everything is person, everything is God, source, life force energy. So she showed me that she was going to go to this beautiful location, but she made it clear I couldn't go with her. I was where I was in that moment was as far as I could go. And interestingly enough, I didn't ask why. I'm one of those kinds of people that's always asking why about things. I'm analytical as well as creative. I'm spiritual, as just all of it matters to me. And so the one thing I did do though is when I got to the boundary where I couldn't go any further, I wanted to see if could get my hand into it. What happened if I would reach into it? Like, would my hand go
Wow.
in? Would I get sucked in? What would happen? Like, she says I can't go, but can I really not go? So I'm really like
Yes.
interested in stuff like this. So I went to touch it, and even though it was absolutely translucent and absolutely gorgeous, it was solid to my touch. So she was
Mm.
able to come and go and permeate the boundary. I couldn't even get my hand past it.
Wow.
So that was one of the shared death experiences. Another shared death experience has to do with a dog once again, where my dog had an emergency thing happen, and it was something internal going on that we didn't even know was going on. And he was in really good health. And then one day he jumped off of the couch, and then he just started moving strangely. And I realized, okay, something's gone really wrong here. And I took him to the vet. They did an ultrasound, and they determined that he most likely had cancer internally. And one of the masses had burst something inside
Mm.
of his body. And it was like, I don't know, midnight. They didn't have a surgeon on staff, and it was an emergency hospital, and surgery just wasn't an option until the next morning. So I asked them, well, can you just give him enough pain meds? Because I want to make sure he doesn't suffer. But we can't make this decision in the morning until the morning time anyway, because there's no surgeon. So I don't want him to be in the hospital overnight. I want to take him home. So loaded him up with painkillers and then brought him home. And I could just tell that his life force energy was draining. And I could tell that, okay, he's probably letting me know that this is his time to go. So drove him back to the emergency office. And while I was sitting in the treatment room waiting for the vet to come in, I decided to open up an energy healing oasis. And for me, what those look like is very dimensional, and they're very round. And it's like we're in the middle of it, and there's all this beautiful light, and all these angelic beings are showing up because I'm calling them in. Without me trying to use my volition to make this happen, another portal opened up on my left hand side, and it was a vertical portal, and it was very bright, and it was golden light. And it opened up, and then another being showed up through this portal of light, and it was a previous dog that I had shared my life with, that had also shared her life with my dog that I was getting ready to have to euthanize. And so immediately I knew, oh, okay. So the dog that was getting ready to be euthanized, his name was Lovey. And immediately I just knew, oh, it's Lovey's time to go, because Astrid is here to shepherd him back home. And
Wow.
she wasn't focused on me at all. It was as though I didn't exist. She was absolutely focused on her task, which was to shepherd Lovey back home. And so when the vet came back in to let me know that, yeah, we do need to euthanize, he is crashing and this is not kind to him, I just knew. I gave permission. So I was like, okay, yeah, I knew you were going to say that. And so I just, continued holding the space, put my hands on my sweet dog, put my forehead on him. And then she administered the drug so that
Mm.
it could help him move along. And then I knew it was I knew when he left, because the energy changed, the temperature changed, and that portal closed up. And so, I mean, I
Wow.
have like multiple stories. Like just like it's gorgeous, and it's humbling, but it's also euphoric in a way, because even though it broke my heart to have to say goodbye to my
Hmm.
dog, because
Hmm.
I believe that dogs are expressions of source too. And some of our household pets, I believe, are angels that have agreed to come into physical form and be with us so that we can experience an unconditional love that's really sometimes challenging between people. But
Hmm.
it's a little bit easier sometimes between household pets or wildlife or what have you. So, yeah, I just think that it's an honor to get to witness that and to get to be a part of that. Plus, everything that I've been shown through the mediumship readings that I do, and the angel and spirit guide channeling that I do, it is absolutely gorgeous. So I don't ever recommend that anyone hasten their death, but I do let them know death is the illusion, not life. Like, yes, our physical bodies will complete their life cycles and they will be laid to rest, but our spirit, our soul, our essence, that never dies. And it's beautiful to know that. And I get to see that. I've gotten to see that so many times.
That's beautiful. And it reminds me of I lost my dog in the last year and a little
Mm,
bit. And because it came from a previous relationship, the dog was in with the other person. But I knew that her time had come, and I had spent many years I walked her every day during the like for years, and she was 15 or 16 around there. And I knew the day that she was going to be euthanized. I knew the day that we had to put her down. And I was just a wreck, and I was sitting on my bed, and I was getting text message from my ex just saying, they're going to do it soon. And I remember kind of waiting for that. Okay, it's done. And I was sitting there, and I remember I stood up and I thought, why haven't I heard anything? And maybe this is me explaining this, and I've never got this personal about this. I've never shared this, but maybe you can give me some insight on why this happened. But I got up and I went to walk, and I felt sorrow like I've never felt. Like it was just like an uh, tremendous amount and I went, oh no. And it felt like my heart sunk. And then it was like, oh, and I just kind of like fell to my knees, and I just kind of like laid up against the bed, and I was like, oh, I don't want to look at my phone. And I look at my phone, and it just said, it's done. We did it. It's happened. And it was right at the same time. And that stuck with me because, and I cried, and I went through the grief process. I'm still grieving over it. She was a really special dog to me. But I guess I wondered why I went to sorrow and sadness. I don't know whether sometimes I think, was I picking up on everyone else's feelings around it more so than the feeling of the dog? Because I would think that her little spirit, she was done. Like she couldn't function any longer. So I think I've concluded, maybe to make myself feel better, that I was picking up on everyone's sorrow around it. And I'm just wondering what your, you know, how would you take that if I explained that to you?
For me personally, I would take that as yes, because you are empathic, you're highly sensitive. Most likely you are picking up on everyone else's sorrow, but also you are honoring your own sorrow.
Mm.
Because even though I'm a medium and I can be in contact with my loved ones who've transitioned, other people's loved ones who've transitioned, people who are in spirit who know that they can get my attention because they know that I can do this. I have to kind of have boundaries and borders like that. I'm off duty. Don't try to talk to me right now, kind of thing. I still deeply miss the physical presence of every being I've ever had to say goodbye to from this physical realm. So all of what I've been shown is that once the spirit is and the soul is starting to kind of extricate from this human experience, there is no sorrow. There is no suffering. So there wouldn't have been any sorrow or suffering for you to pick up on from your dog
Okay.
because at that point, so one of the things I've been shown is that when a physical body is starting to go through its death process and this life cycle is coming to its completion, the human spirit and the soul start to just sort of extricate its focus from the form. Therefore, the soul, the human spirit, is not going to suffer. It's not going to feel any pain. The body might look like it's feeling pain or suffering, but it isn't. And even people who I've known that have come close to death but haven't had an NDE, but yet can tell you, almost like a brush with death, they'll tell you they had so much adrenaline going through their body at that moment. And this is the beautiful design of bodies. When we feel great pain and it's about ready for our time to go, supposedly the body is just flooded with endorphins. It is
Mm.
flooded with neurochemicals and adrenaline as well to help you not even feel the pain. And I've had a lot of people tell me that physically, that
Wow.
they didn't feel any pain, they didn't feel any suffering. And that's what I've been told again, time and time again from the beings in spirit: no pain, no suffering. And so oftentimes the soul, the spirit, will be joined by relatives and the like who've already transitioned, right along with spirit guides and guardian angels. And everybody beautifully sits vigil with that physical body. And then
Wow.
when the physical body has completely drained of all of its life force energy, then all of these other beings raise to a higher frequency. They don't really necessarily go anywhere, they just raise to a higher frequency. And so I've also been shown that it's almost like we're worlds within worlds within worlds, like those nesting dolls. And
Mm.
so we here on Earth are of a certain frequency, and then beings in spirit are at a much higher frequency. So that's why I'm able to access them immediately just upon thought, just thinking about them. Oh, they're here, and I can communicate with them because they're not like somewhere far off. They are basically, it's like an overlay or an outer earth, so to say, like a new earth, but
Hmm.
a heavenly place, a really beautiful spirit world. And so yeah, I'm once again, I keep losing my train of thought about what the original question was. Oh, okay. So like I think you were asking like whose sorrow you were feeling. So yeah, I think that yeah, you were honoring your own sorrow. And I think that for you, if you're anything like me, you will feel a difference in the fabric of the universe when a physical presence leaves it that once upon a time was close to you and held a deep sacred space in your heart. You feel it. Something has changed and you
Mm.
feel it. And yeah, even though I can
Yeah.
feel great joy that my loved ones are in a much more beautiful place than this physical planet Earth, I still miss them. So my
Mhm.
sorrow is for me, not for them. I'm happy and joyful for them, but
Yeah.
I
I,
miss them.
I was gonna say, I think you cleared it up, because that is exactly how it happened. I'd got off the bed. I thought, well, I must have some time. I haven't heard that.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to walk out of my bedroom, and I took about 2 steps, and I knew again, I was on the other side of the city. I wasn't there to know, but I knew, and I immediately fell to my
Mm,
knees just in sorrow. And it was probably my own feeling of, oh gosh, she's gone now.
yeah.
And what was weird is I was crying on my bed, but not knowing why I wasn't terribly upset. Like I was like thinking, well, okay, is she gone? Like what? It was almost confusing. So then when I got up, it was like, oh, it's done. And then I'm looking at my phone, which was turned upside down, and I thought I don't want to turn the phone because if
Mm,
I do, I think it's going to confirm. And it was within 20 seconds of that moment, like it was right at that moment.
right.
So I almost picked up energetically the moment that my dog's soul had gone. I have a couple areas to go down, and I need to make sure I remember what I'm trying to ask. So you mentioned this is my own curiosity, but maybe some of the audience has wondered this question. I'm wondering if we put our minds together, if we figure if you may have some knowledge around this. You mentioned that when you had the shared death experience of the dog that transitioned,
Mm.
and another one of your dogs had come to greet and to take, much like if someone passes a grandmother, or aunt, uncle, someone will come and why in that instance would a dog's energy and another dog's energy meet if we're all partially, if we're souls? Like, is that because they're of a different level of soul than us? Or like what would your, like why wouldn't it be someone you like an ant come and grab the dog and go? Like why would it be another dog to a dog? I'm just trying to wonder what you would
Yeah.
think.
So for me, it was because they were so intertwined, because I had both of those dogs in my life at the same time. And
Okay.
so they became very intertwined. So nobody else would show up for the dog that wasn't meaningful to the dog.
Mm,
And so I do believe that when we're first making our transition, even though we're all souls and we can take on any form that we want in the spirit world or remain formless if we want to, it's up to us. I do believe that right at first, those that are there to greet us are people that are going to help us, like we're going to recognize them, right? So
okay.
even if they've gone on, they're doing something else, if they have chosen rebirth, not everyone's going to choose rebirth, nirvana, right? You escape the cycle of birth, death, rebirth, and all of that. You don't have to reincarnate. But I do believe that even if they've gone off and reincarnated, well, the larger part of every one of us, what I've been shown, still resides in the spirit world. Only a small percentage of our soul even focuses on these physical forms. So when I first make my transition, I am sure all of the beings that I've ever shared my life with, both human and non human, will be there to greet me just simply because that's what will make me feel really comfortable and will make me feel really joyful. And then once I truly let go of this physical form and rise to that higher frequency and that higher level, then all of these beautiful beings that did occupy the souls that occupied the bodies that were the dogs that I shared my life with, um, they will then transform and let me see what they actually look like in the spirit world,
Mm,
because I don't believe we'll have pets in the spirit world, because pets don't have autonomy and agency. They don't have sovereignty. But in the spirit world, heaven, we all have agency. We all have autonomy. And I know at least three of my dogs are what I believe were angels, like I said, who
mm,
came in and agreed to be here and share my life with me. So I am just waiting to see what they look like when I get there, because when they visit me here, in a way that I can see them and tangibly even hear their clicking on the floor and feel the weight of them on my bed, they're still letting me see them in their familiar form so that I
mm,
can recognize them. And the other, I don't know, it's probably quite a while ago by now, I woke up and I didn't want to open my eyes because I had had such a beautiful visitation from one of my dogs. And I
mm.
came to full, complete wakefulness. It wasn't a hypnagogic state. It wasn't, that liminal space. I was fully awake. And it was just so funny. I'm like, I'm just refusing to open my eyes because it was kind of like you, but in a different way. You didn't want to look at that phone and get that bad news, right? And
Mhm.
I just didn't want to open my eyes because I wanted to linger there for a bit longer. And it was really sweet because my dog and my angel lingered there with me. And it was the most beautiful thing. And then when I opened my eyes, it was this very beautiful euphoric state. And then I felt myself coming down in frequency to the slower, denser, form of humanity. And
Wow.
I don't mean that in a judgment way, hierarchical, but we are in a slower frequency here because we have to be in a form that we call matter. Yes, we're energy,
Hmm.
but matter is just particles in relationship to each other, and energy is what I've been shown is particles of light. And so we are beings of light. And so when we're at that higher frequency, then we kind of come down into a little bit lower frequency to be in this physical form.
Yeah, and I think last time I spoke to you, I recalled a near-death experience who were not, it was actually a STE, it was a spiritual transformative experience. She had lost her mother, and her mother had showed up at the end of her bed, and her mother, she said, "Where have you been?" To her mom, and she said, "What do you mean? I just died, like
Mm,
it just happened." So it had been years, and she said, "No, like I've been waiting for you," kind of thing. And they had a little conversation. And then what started to happen, it's one of the main, when people find my channel right now, it's the main featured video, just because I think it was so fascinating. I don't know how much longer it'll be up there, but she basically had this mother who was talking to her start to disappear, but she could still hear her. And so she said, "Well, what's happening? I can hear you. I can hear you, but I can't see you any longer." And the way she described it was so great. She said the energy here, it's too dense. Like
mm,
it takes so much work to bring the speed of the energy down to do that. So I'm still here, but and that's kind of, so basically in the idea that it took work for her to get down to that energetic
mhm.
level for her to actually have that experience with her. And it
Right.
was brief because she couldn't hold it, and she kind of like back up into the higher frequency energy, but she could still hear her, and then that dissipated as well. And I just thought it's kind of a beautiful story, but sad at the same time.
Oh,
But it shows that energy is different here than it is on the
right.
other side. So when you talk about that, that just reminded me of that. How do you, when you see these things, so when you say you saw the veil, or you've seen this and you touched it, those types of things, are these visual prompts that come up in your mind, the way you could close your eyes and have a dream? Are they in your actual physical reality? How would you describe how you're seeing it? And it might be hard, but I don't think I asked you that before the first time we talked.
It's interesting because I used to, I probably previously, I would have thought that was clairvoyance, but now I realize no, I'm actually seeing these things with my physical eyes. I can have them open, I can have them closed. It's almost like, oh, I guess one way to think of it is in the olden days when we had negatives of films before you would get them developed into a picture, you can
Mhm.
hold them up, right? And you can see this physical image, and then you can also see beyond it. And so,
Okay.
like, I live really close to a lake, and I go out there almost every day. And there was one particular time many years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, where I was sitting in meditation at the lake, and I opened my eyes, and very close to me was this beautiful portal of light that opened up. And it was like my eyes were open. I was completely awake. I was done with my meditation. I remember looking at it and thinking, wow, that is really mesmerizing. And it looks sort of like when you look across the surface of hot asphalt and you see those heat waves.
Hmm.
So it looked like that, but it was once again vertical. This is so interesting because everything that I've been touching that's of the other world that I don't hold through my volition to bring to my consciousness, oftentimes for me, has shown up vertically. So this started out as a vertical portal of light. And then when I paid attention to it, it became dimensional. And then it did become almost globe like, but yet I was seeing the entrance of it, so to say. And as I stood up, I thought, oh, wow, I am really dizzy. Am I dehydrated? Did I sit for too long? What is it? It didn't dawn on me yet that it was because I was so close to this portal. So then I walked a little bit away from the portal and I thought, oh, okay, this is interesting. Let me go stand back near that portal because I felt different. So then I went and stood closer to the portal again in that same feeling. So not only can I see this with my physical eyes, I can also, I don't think I hear it necessarily like with my physical ears. I hear things clairaudiently, but I see things with my physical eyes. And and now I've gotten to a point where I realize too that I need to become aware of it because it can affect my physical feeling. Like,
Hmm.
and it's not like a clairsentience, but it's like this thing is imposing upon me a different frequency. Almost like if I get close enough, it would pull me into its orbit. But yet I wouldn't necessarily resonate with it and actually get sucked into it because I'm still in the physical form. That's what it feels
Wow.
like. And it wasn't like I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm getting sucked into it. It was kind of like it's sort of that thing where you go to reach for it and it's there. It's not like my hand disappeared. My hand didn't
Right.
disappear or anything. And I could reach for it and it's still right there, but it was a whole other frequency. So it was
Hmm.
just a whole other world.
It almost sounds like a hologram in nature,
Yeah,
like it's there, and it almost seems like the way you're describing it is if some of those layers have been peeled for you. For some
right.
reason, you've been become aware of those layers. Like, I think as humans, we come here and there is this, if we're here for this purpose of living, growing soulfully and all these things, for where we are currently in our evolution, for whatever reason, there's been kind of a blockage for us to see these things. I
Mm,
think we're in a transitional period. I think that's why you and I are sitting here in this
right,
year of 2025, able to have this conversation. And then hopefully, as long as everything records correctly, share it with the world so people can actually hear and
right.
understand. And some of them will judge, some of them may not, all these things. But at the same time, 100 years ago, this wouldn't
Mm,
have happened, as you
right.
know. So my point though is, when you step back from that and you watch that, that is evolution. We are in the midst of that evolution. And so
Mhm.
I guess my point is possibly 300, 500, 1,000 years from now, if humans are still existing the way we do, we quite possibly could be existing in a very different, like it may be a very unrecognizable thing. I've also said this, I've also said, to put it in perspective, if you were to take someone from an ancient civilization and you were to take them out of that moment and plant them in front of your brand new car, and they were to look in your car,
Yeah,
number one, fear would definitely happen. They wouldn't know what's going on. They would think we're from a completely different planet. It would be unrecognizable. Computers, everything would be unrecognizable. So we have to keep that in mind when we're having these conversations, because there are people definitely out there that will see this as kind of woo woo and crazy, but that's only because we don't know what lies ahead. Like we're not there.
right.
And so it just sounds to me like you're at that, you have this ability of having that. And I think you said this early on in the conversation that we all do have this ability, these abilities, and they're there if we want to harness them and use them.
Hmm.
Do you believe I've been given this answer a lot? Are you one to also believe that meditation is a great first step for people if they're wanting to open up those gifts a little, or become more aware of those gifts?
I personally think that anything that someone can do, if they want to call it meditation, contemplation, goodness, walking in nature, because I've worked with so many different clients that their mind is oftentimes very busy and doing sort of like that monkey mind, hummingbird mind, and they don't want to sit in meditation. And so I'll tell them, okay, well, even washing dishes can be a meditation. Sitting at a red light and staring at the green, waiting for it to turn green, can be a meditation. So I think that anything that anyone can do that can get them quiet and get them focused on their internal life, get them focused on their spirit, get them focused on their own energy field, that is a good first step. I had one person once upon a time tell me, oh my goodness, I would love to get guidance from my spirit guides, but I don't have 20 minutes to meditate. I said, who told you you need 20 minutes to meditate? And who told you you need to meditate to hear your spirit guides?
Mm.
I mean, my spirit guides and my guardian angels, my soul, all of those beautiful beings are around me right now. They are always with me. It's not like they come when I call them, they are right here. And in fact, what I've been shown is that the soul is an individuated expression of source. And then that kind of becomes this beautiful tributary called the human spirit. And then the human spirit funnels through or channels through the physical form. And so all these things work in unison with each other. And so, oh my God, this is so funny. I have never lost the train of thought on three different questions. What is a meditation? And then I get the loop back. Okay. So basically anytime anyone can tap into their own internal guidance and listen to their intuition, listen to that still small voice, listen to the awakened ego. Because I remember last time we talked about an ego, and I'm not someone who bashes an ego. I believe that we're born with an ego for a reason. And then you can either stay in that little unevolved ego and have lots of problems, and feel very selfish and very scared of everything and me, or you can open up that ego, let it awaken, and let it be of service to spirit. So our soul is in service to us, always guiding us and always trying to entrain us to the highest frequency that we can possibly metabolize and synthesize in this human body. And so anything that anyone can do, if you're sitting there playing guitar and really getting into your song or playing whatever other instruments you play, that's a form of meditation. So
Mm,
I do sometimes hesitate using that word because so many people have an idea of what meditation means. And for me, do something that you love, do something that allows you to lose track of time. And just make sure you don't have like a TV going in the background or a movie playing, because that's too much information coming in at once.
mm,
What I've also been shown, kind of to touch on something you brought up a little bit ago, is no, I don't believe that we're still going to be in this form thousands of years from now. I'm not even sure we're going to be in this particular form hundreds of years from now, because what I know is that as I do this work and as I tap into the spirit world daily, working with my clients or just talk to my spirit guides and my soul and my guardian angels every day, the first thing I do when I wake up is thank source for another day. Thank you for this life. Thank you for my angels. I thank my angels for choosing me. So, what I recognize is that I have to remember to eat. I love food, but when I do this work, I am nourished by my work. I am nourished by spirit. I am nourished by light. And then, if I have a number of clients throughout the day back to back, sometimes I'll get to like 4 p.m. and realize, oh my gosh, I haven't eaten anything because
mm.
I've not been hungry. So, I don't know which teacher said this, but she said that we're she's heard it be said that we're moving from a carbon-based life form to a spirit-based life form.
Mm,
And then when you become a spirit-based life form, you don't have to eat. And what I love about that is that then nothing else has to die so that other beings can live. There
mhm.
isn't the eat and be eaten. There isn't the predator and prey, because
Wow.
you don't have to feed this body, nor do you have to clothe it or shelter it. And I think it was Sri Aurobindo who talks about the Gnostic human. So right now we're Homo sapien, supposedly wise human.
Mhm.
And then there's Homo universalis, the universal human. And then I think I read somewhere Homo spiritus, so spiritual being. And so I believe that that's why things are ramping up right now. And so many people are finding these wonderful podcasts like yours, is they are just hungering and thirsting for this, because they're like, yeah, oh my gosh, this makes sense. And I want to get in on that. I want to be a part of the ascension of consciousness and to do my part to assist in that. And that's the beauty. The more and more and more of us that do this together, it happens faster. They raise, I raise, I raise, they raise. It's just the most gorgeous thing. And it's so wonderful to get to participate in this.
I'm glad that you brought it up. I'm glad that you brought that up and that you went in that direction only because so I write down different questions that I was going to ask you. One of them was you had mentioned souls of dogs, souls of trees. You had mentioned the things, and so I've mentioned this in many episodes that I'm plant-based. I've been plant-based for
Mm,
over 10 years now.
good.
And it was only for many reasons. And I don't really go down that rabbit hole because most of my friends aren't. And I accept and love everybody for the choices and these things. This is just what made sense for me.
Right.
And I think that you're right. I think we'll get to a point. I mean, look, a lot of people are moving more, even if they do consume meat and things, they are moving more into less and less of that and having smoothies or having more things that are lighter on their body. And because the question I was going to go into was, if trees are souls, well, here I am, because one of the arguments that some people will,
Mm,
if they want to contest why I'm doing what I do, which I don't generally engage in because I don't care to. It's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I
right.
feel better and
Yeah.
my health is better and I that's just me. I'm not telling anyone they have to do anything. But when they do engage in it, they'll say, "Well, do you realize you're eating poor broccoli pieces and you're eating poor these," and I'll be like, "What?" And they're like, "Well, that's a spirit too and that's a soul too." And it gets down this whole like, okay, well, where does that end, right? Like that doesn't I don't know how to make much sense of that. I don't know if there's kind of a hierarchy of what is here in regards to what holds a soul and what doesn't. I don't know. I do know I feel bad when I kill spiders. I do know I've let out a couple of months ago I ran outside with a spider and let it out, and one of my neighbors kind of smiled. This woman, she just kind of looked at me and smiled because she knew exactly what I was doing. I was like, oh no. Shameful moment. I like walking. I need to be the man that kills the spider, but I'm like, no, I'm letting it go back in the garden. So like
Yeah,
I do my best to try to be the best I can as the
right,
person I am, but I don't want to go too crazy. But I don't know where I'm going with the question. I guess it is that does everything hold energy and spirit and soul? And if so, that means I am consuming it, even though, but I look at it like this. I think the argument, I'm not arguing with anyone, so I please anybody, but I look at I'm going to do my best to prevent as much suffering as possible.
right,
And that's kind of where my brain goes. And I know we can't all make these choices, and some of us need certain things, and we've decided we need things for our own health, including meat and all these things. So I do not judge anyone. I've had people on my podcast that do have a stronger belief that no, like, and they're very militant about it in a way, and that's to each their own. I'm not like that. So I think though the way you've just described it before that kind of speaks to that whole thing. Whereas if we do get to a point where we don't need to consume to survive, or at least
right.
consume things that are in our life. But I would think by if we get to that point that
Mhm.
we no longer maybe are as physical as we are. I don't
Right.
know if that makes sense. Am I
Yeah,
making
and
sense?
so that's like what we're talking about if we're going from a carbon-based life form to a spirit-based life form. If you're spirit-based life form, you're really light. You're comprised of light, and we are comprised of light. We do emit biophotons, so we already emit light right now. We are already comprised of light. So as we get further along our evolutionary path, we will get less and less and less physical. And like you, I put out spiders. I will even do this in a grocery store 2 different times now because I always get organic food 2 different times in 2 different stores. I found these cute, like little crickets or something mixed in with the lettuce. And I thought, oh, no, 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 you are not going to survive if you stay inside this store. You got plenty to eat, but I know something's going to kill you. Somebody is going to smash you. So I don't mind how silly I look. I'll figure out, well, what can I put this in? Because one of them was a cricket, and I don't know if crickets bite, and one of them was a spider, and I had no idea if it could bite, right? So I'm like getting something. I think with one of them I got a plastic bag or something, and got it very carefully and put my shopping cart down and went outside the door, like left the store to find a bush to put the spider on. And then
Right.
just a couple of days ago I did it with a cricket at Trader Joe's, and I like found like this little, I don't know, this little what cup that they give out testers in that are made of biodegradable paper. I'm like, oh yay, good. And so I grabbed it and
Hmm.
grabbed the cricket, which took a little finagling so that I didn't smash the cricket and put it outside. So yeah, I will do that too. And I don't care if people think, what the heck is she doing? Because sometimes what that does is it gives somebody else permission to do it too. They're like,
Hmm.
oh, that's a good idea. So, yes, I do believe that every single thing is an expression of source. We all have that divine spark within us. And, one of the philosophies is animism, that everything has personhood, not just people. However, I don't have any doubt whatsoever that the rock is less conscious than the tree. And the tree has less conscious awareness than the lion. And the lion has less conscious awareness at the spiritual level than the human. So I do believe that as long as we're not totally destroying the earth to grow these crops, that's why I choose to be plant based. Yeah, that broccoli is going to give up its life force for me to eat. However, I don't believe that it feels suffering or pain nearly at the level that the animals feel it that are raised in really horrid conditions. Many years ago, I volunteered with an animal rescue group. And there was here in California, there was a really big factory farm that had gotten slapped with so many animal cruelty violations that their answer was to shut up, to close up shop and walk away. And
Hmm.
so then we and the animal rescue groups all came together and went and rescued battery cages full of chickens. And oh my gosh, the stench even driving up to these factory farms was horrendous.
Mm.
And then when you go inside there, it's dangerous. They've got these weird scaffolding systems set up to help you reach the battery cages that are all stacked upon each other. Horrible and horrendous. Many birds, chickens, were in cages with other chickens that had been dead for who knows how long, feces dropping into the cages below. Those were egg producing chickens. So, and I do believe that yes, chickens, cows, pigs, all of the animals, they are going to feel pain and suffering much more than a plant is. And as long as you don't grow the plant with too many or with pesticides, and you do kind of biodynamic farming and such, the earth is not going to be at all disrespected by the growing of that. And that beautiful plant gets to have its lifespan, and then it gets cut, and then yes, we consume it.
Mhm.
So eventually, I do believe as a species, we will get away from consuming things, like I said, so then nothing has to die for us. But yeah, I've had plenty of people who will try to have a conversation like that with me. Well, the broccoli died for you. And I'm like, and I say prayers for it, and I give my thanks for it, and I'm grateful for it. But I know that it's going to feel a different level of, it's not going to feel pain and
Mhm.
suffering the way that these animals are.
Yeah.
So yeah, just like you, I don't get into these conversations much because this is my own choice that I made for myself,
Mhm.
and it's important to me. But no one needs to know my eating style. But as soon
Right.
as someone knows that you're plant based, they want to talk to you about it, and that's
Yeah,
fine as long as you truly want to dialogue with me about it. If you want to
absolutely.
debate me on it, I'm not interested in debating.
Yeah,
But if you want to dialogue with me, I'll
yeah.
dialogue with you.
I've even had some fellow plant-based people say to me, "Why don't you, you got this platform, why don't you
Oh,
really try?" And I said, "Listen, I'm
mm,
also not about division. I'm not about
exactly,
dividing. I'm not about
exactly.
pushing." And I ate a lot of meat growing up. I know, I was in that place.
Yeah,
And and again, I'm also not here to tell people that I'm right and they're wrong. I'm
right.
here to share my own personal experience and knowledge and feelings in life. And if someone decides to agree or to want to
Hmm.
go on that journey as well, that's great. We do have people who are out there with the picket signs and those things. Those people have come here into this earth to do that. That's the work they feel they want to do, and that's great. I just don't feel anyone should be pressured to do that because I made that choice. I shouldn't feel
Right,
pressured to have to throw it down everyone's throat because then I'm kind of it's a disservice. I'd rather just lead
right,
by example. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is my choices. And if they decide to go that route, they do. And
right.
so yeah,
Yeah,
it's one of those controversial areas I don't try to go on the show too much because I also want people to not feel being like they're being attacked because of their personal choices too. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
yeah.
But I love the way you put it. I like how you put it. And I have heard that many times that we eventually get to this point where someone had a vision one time that we live off the air,
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden it turns into more of a spirit, like a spirit body. And I'm like, well, how
Right.
does that transition? Like, I don't know, but maybe that's just an evolutionary thing that begins to happen. So, but we're all in it right now. We're all feeling that right now. You definitely answered a lot of the questions. I remember the first time I had you on, one thing we didn't touch on tonight was what a lot of the last session we talked about focused on. And I think that could be why we're meant to talk different tonight. I think we
Mm,
brought up a lot of amazing conversational pieces that we didn't talk about in the last
right.
one, because in the last one we were focused a little bit on your STE, which was your spiritual experience, with the I don't even like to use the word hell, but that experience that you had where you went to this darker side or this other side. But I think from what I remember or recall, if it comes to me right, that did you come to terms that this was an internal thing that internal within us and not a place that we're thrown into? I'm wondering if you could kind of explain just a briefly
Yeah.
what happened in that moment and how that can, because you mentioned it earlier on, but I'm almost glad that we spoke about the other things and we're gonna kind of come full circle around to this again. If you
Yeah.
can explain what happened in that.
Yeah. So I never actually experienced any kind of a hell realm. So what it was is that, you're only 10, 11 years old when someone says you're going to die and go to hell. You start fearing that, like an existential angst, very young. Like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to me? But no one had ever even told me what hell might look like. So if someone were to say, well, what does hell look like? I don't know. I've got no clue. So it was really interesting, that like I found out years later why I went so far down that hole. So, no, I have never been shown a hell realm. I don't actually believe that hell exists. I don't believe in the devil. I don't believe in evil. I don't believe in any of that. I do believe that while we're here physically, there are things that can hurt us physically, but there is nothing in the spirit world that can hurt us. So for me personally, what I would try to do each night was just like kind of rock myself so I wouldn't go to sleep. Or what I was doing back then that I didn't know was a mantra is I would just say, I love God. I love God. I love God. I would just keep repeating it over and over to keep
Wow.
my mind occupied. And I learned that years later, that's a mantra. You just keep saying the same thing over and over again. So yeah, no, ever, never an experience of seeing anything that was hellish. So thankfully, I don't even know what that could possibly look like because it's just never been shown to me from anyone who I've ever interacted with in spirit, whether it be angels, spirit guides, beings who I'm interacting with who are in the spirit world who used to be here physically. No one ever says anything about that. In fact, they say, well, no, that just doesn't even exist. If what I forget which theologian said this, but there is only God, there is nothing but God. And so there is only source, there is nothing but source, there is only love. So then once we're no longer here in a physical form, that's what we immediately experience. So I've also never experienced or been shown anything about souls or spirits getting stuck in the in-between. There is just no. And the reason why I feel very almost sad that that belief is sometimes put out there like, oh, I'm going to go shepherd these souls that are stuck. And some people say that they do that. Well, that's just one more thing to scare people. Not that that's their purpose. They don't mean to be scaring them, but people already fear death. And
Mm-hmm.
now they've got to fear, oh my God, I could be a soul and get stuck in the in between. There is no in between. There is no getting stuck anywhere. Basically, the soul right now is in the spirit world having its experience and experiencing whatever it wants. And part of it is focused here. And
Mm.
part of it creates a field around me. And so for me, soul just stands for space of unified love or source of unified love. And it's this beautiful thing that creates a field around me and then coalesces into this human body. But the majority of it is right now in the spirit world, in heaven, having its own experience, whatever it wants to do. And then when this physical form is done and that soul no longer needs to be focused here, boom, it is immediately back up to that higher frequency. So yeah, no hell realms, no souls getting stuck anywhere. I don't know where those storylines ever came from, but to me, I kind of hesitate to say this because this might be controversial, but organized religion, when wielded improperly, controls people. Fear of death controls people. Fear of being a soul getting stuck in the in between can control people. So, one of the ways to decentralize all of that power and dissipate all of that fear is to be our own sovereign entities, our own sovereign beings with our own ecosystem and our own cosmology, and to recognize no hell, no evil, no in between place, no place to get stuck. We're here, then we're at a higher frequency, and then we're done with this particular frequency. But yet, we still always can know what's going on here. That's why our loved ones, when I do a mediumship reading, I will sometimes bring in messages from someone's loved one that hasn't even happened yet. Not like I'm telling them their future, but I'll say, oh, keep your eye out for this, keep your eye out for that. And it doesn't make sense to them in that moment. But then they'll send me a picture a week, 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later. Oh my gosh, I didn't even know that my son had drawn this or my daughter had made that. And this is exactly what you were bringing through. So they're aware of what we're doing and what we're going through right here, but they're not pulled down by it because they're at such a high frequency, like what you were mentioning with that other person with the NDE or the STE. They're just at this beautiful frequency that why would you want your frequency to get lowered? There's just no
Right.
reason
Right.
for it. It's like, I
Yeah.
can see what's going on down there, but
Yeah.
I don't need to go mix with that. But I can send my love and I can send my prayers. And so some people I have been shown, and I do intend for this to be my last physical go around. I would love to be someone from the spirit world and from the heavenly realms that is assisting here on earth, but not being here on earth.
Mm.
And because right now, I think I said this last time, I feel like earth is heaven adjacent, but there's definitely too much suffering here for this to be heaven. But with enough evolution, which is ramping up and speeding up beautifully, it will. merge and mingle, and the energies will merge and mingle. And then, excuse me, and then once they merge and mingle, all of consciousness gets drawn up through that ascension process. And we bring into this frequency divine awareness, because each one of us is divine. And if our soul is in service to us as a human spirit and a human expression, and they're always entraining us to the highest version of ourselves. And one person asked me recently, well, can you explain frequency and can you explain what you're talking about with attunements and such? And it's like when you tune a guitar and you
Hmm.
play the guitar, it doesn't just stay in tune. Every so often you have to like retune it. And so what we're being invited to do is allow ourselves to be entrained to a higher frequency, and then we get comfortable there, and then we get invited up to a higher frequency and we get comfortable there.
Mm,
So
that's
even the people
wow.
who aren't doing quote unquote spiritual work, they're being entrained as well. Now, if you're
Hmm.
functioning from that really small, unawakened ego that only worries about you and yours, me and mine kind of a thing, then the growth pains are going to be a bit more
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
than those of us that are just like, oh, I'm ready for this, let's do this kind of a
Hmm.
thing. But
Hmm.
even at that, I always let my soul know, thank you for attuning all energies before they flow through me, and please make sure to always attune them so that they don't come just flooding through me and burst
Right.
me open, because I don't need that. It's like
Right.
incremental steps.
Absolutely. It's kind of like that idea, be careful what you wish for, be careful what just take things one step at a time. And we're all,
Right.
I think, at different place in our journey.
Yes.
There's so your STE was that orb situation. You had seen that orb. So that would have been considered an STE
Oh
or
yeah.
one of
Yeah.
many. You have all these different experiences, but
Yeah.
so that's probably where my brain was going with that. And so,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so that's amazing. So I totally agree with everything you're saying, and I'm trying to remember what I was going to ask you because my train of thought it goes off too because I get a
Yeah.
bunch of almost like hits. Okay, ask this question or go into this direction, and then it kind of gets lost.
Right.
But the STE, I would consider that moment you had with that orb an STE.
Oh,
The
absolutely. Yeah.
oh, I know what I was gonna say. It's and I also because you were talking about how um I don't know, you were mentioning something about our spirit bodies or whatnot, but I was thinking one thing I'm again, I don't need to know this or have seen this to feel this is that we definitely have because a lot of people will say, we are part energy and part of God, part of whatever this big thing is, and we're all just one, we're all one, and we're all just this one energy. There's different ideologies that kind of float around there about what we are, and
Mm.
it can get confusing. I'm just going to say it like that.
Right.
But what I would say is this, and I'm sure a lot of people can attest to this or know this. For instance, there are plenty of times in my life where I've met an individual, including my fiance, okay, where you meet this person and you recognize them immediately. You
Mm.
know immediately that somehow there's some sort of connection, and yet you've never met them before in this incarnation, in this life.
Right.
I think at times when we have those, I even had a moment one time at a Walmart of all places where I was in line and I was paying for an item and I had an urge to look behind me. This is about 6, 7 years ago. I had an urge to look behind me and there was a woman standing. She was not much different in age than me, standing way at the back of the line. And she looked at me and we connected and we smiled at each other to say, hey, I know, like, hi, like,
Right.
but it wasn't like flirtation. It wasn't, it was a recognition
Hmm.
moment. And I was like, oh my God, like, hi. And then I went back and I continued to go through my things. And by the time I had packed everything, I had recognized, oh, that was a different kind of connection. What was that? So now I'm looking for the person. Well, she was gone. Now I don't know if that person was physically really even there or if that person was there and we had this recognition. But many times a lot of us can recognize that. And what I would say is that's our spirit, that's our soul.
Hmm.
And oh, I know why this led me into this thought is that, you know, if you're vibrating at a higher frequency, um, and so let's say you're over there right now and you're vibrating at the higher frequency and I'm missing you, let's say,
Hmm.
and I want to see you. Well, my higher frequency, my higher self is there with you.
Right.
It's already there with you. So for you to take the work to come down to see my self in this physical form for a moment, and yes, there are moments when maybe humans need that. Maybe there's a reason why this individual I interviewed needed that from her mother. Maybe there was something that needed to happen in order for her to kind of get on with her life or all these different things. But just for the fun of it, if you're already there with me, it wouldn't
Right.
make logical sense for you to come down to that level when you're there already with me. Am I making sense when I say it like that?
I hear your point, and so you're
Okay.
making sense. However, we are here having this reality right here. So even though the larger part of us are in the spirit world, having our experiences there, interacting with our loved ones, there's still this beauty to it, to also having that being come into what appears to us physical or translucent, to where we know that they're not even here physically. And I mean, that was a spiritually transformative experience for you, right? So if we are here and we're here in this form, and part of the things that we're doing is evolving spiritually, well, that aided your spiritual evolution. Just like
Mm,
that person who you interviewed, seeing her mom and then hearing her mom, that opened her up spiritually. Like
hmm.
many years ago, when I was at a retreat in Southern California, and I was sleeping in this very tiny rammed earth house, like one room little thing with this little solar light that barely lit up the room. I was off a little bit of a distance from everybody else in the main meditation hall. And I woke up one night, and what woke me up was the light in my room changed. And I realized, okay, this wouldn't be from this little solar light. That little thing does no good. It's too tiny. The solar panels were too tiny, what have you. And I woke up, and there were these really amazing, powerful Native American men that were on horseback, bareback. They had their deerskin pants on or whatever they wore, bare skinned up in here with their chest plates made of bone and the headdress. One of them had a headdress on, and that obviously was the person who was like the leader of them. And I can't remember now how many there were, because my main focus was on him and maybe two others, but there were more than that. And telepathically, they were asking me, why are you here? What is your purpose here? And telepathically, I conveyed to them, I'm here seeking enlightenment. I'm here on a meditation retreat. I'm here to better myself, not just for myself, though, for all of consciousness, not even all of humanity, but all of consciousness. And then
Mm,
also, I was able to convey, and I am really sorry from the bottom of my heart for what was done to Indigenous peoples, for what was done to First Nation peoples. I am very sorry for what happened.
mm.
And it wasn't like some big fanfare thing. It wasn't like bells and whistles. I just heard telepathically, you are welcome. Like, you are welcome here. And then they started to write off,
Wow.
and then it dissipated. And then the next day, I found out during one of the meditations, or the group things after meditation, that particular land that that retreat center sets on was Native American land, occupied Native American land that
Mm,
did get taken from them. And the people who owned the retreat center, at least during that time period, always told all of the Indigenous and Native American people around, you are welcome on this land at any time. You don't need a pass. You don't need to
mm.
pay. You're welcome to come sit meditation. And so someone could say, oh, you made that up, if I knew about it ahead of time. No,
Right.
I didn't make that up, and I didn't know about it ahead of
Right.
time.
Hmm.
So it could be said that they are in the spirit world, and I'm having that interaction with them in spirit world. But you know what was super powerful to me? The personified expression of source named Chenee was this thing. It changed me viscerally. It
Mm,
changed the fabric of who I am. It changed me probably at a DNA level. And that's how I think spiritual evolution takes place, is
mm,
that you allow these things to change you. You don't sit there and try to use your logical mind to shoot holes into it, but you allow it to change you.
hmm.
And so, yeah, I just think that all of those kinds of things are important. What goes on in the spirit world is important. And it seems almost like a time lapse, right? It goes on there and then it can go on here. Not
Hmm.
like everything that happens there happens here, but things that happen here probably happened there first. And so, that person, like you said, maybe she was in line physically and you saw her. Maybe only you saw her. Because I've definitely had multiple experiences in my life where people showed up at the right moment to save me from what surely would have been my physical demise.
Oh,
And it
wow.
would, way out in the middle of, well, I was at a ski resort and skiing out of bounds, which you're not supposed to do. And I ended up getting myself lost. And these two men on snowboards showed up just in perfect time. And it was the last run of the day. The ski lift had quit running. The sun was going down. I'm sure I would have frozen to death had
Wow.
these two men not shown up where they had. And they're like, oh, you're out here by yourself? And I said, well, I got separated from my friends. And they said, well, follow us. We'll get you back to the lodge. And they went completely perpendicular to where I was going. I was not going to end up anywhere near the lodge if I had kept going the route that I was going, thinking just staying underneath the ski lift would get me there. So,
Mm,
out in the middle of nowhere, out of bounds. And then,
yeah.
it's kind of that thing where we get to the lodge and they say, are you good now? I'm like, yeah, good. We wave. And then they snowboard off. And then I'm like, okay, where'd they go? So,
Right, right.
they were not physical beings, I don't think. I
Yeah,
think they were angels. And even though they slowed down their frequency enough for me to see them, I was also in a very heightened state at that moment. Because when you think, oh, this might be my end, physically speaking, you
right.
are in a very heightened state of awareness. So, yeah. So,
That's interesting.
yeah,
And again, whether you take it that they were not physical beings or that they were physical beings with the divine
right.
timing to know to
Angel
be
guidance.
there, right? Because again, like we don't know how much we're being guided even as a physical
Exactly.
being. And in no way when I said earlier about the idea of my higher self being there, my this self, I didn't in any way I was thinking about the way I said it. I didn't in any way mean to have any kind of demeanor as to how important this life is. In fact, I think our existence here is even more important than we can imagine. I think there's something very divine, grand that's happening, and that's why I think the more people that I've talked about with near-death experiences, how many of them, I mean, I'm sure my audience that's listening, that's heard a lot of, if they're still listening at this point into the show, which is amazing, you guys are my troopers. But if you've heard a lot of NDEs, when people first pass on, many times they're greeted by a large amount of loved ones, whether it's people they remember from their current existence or past lives and all these things, and they're all cheering. And there's
Mhm.
this grand, almost like welcoming back of this self that had been put into this life to do the work we're doing. And so if that, that in itself tells you how important it is
Right.
of the work we're doing because there's this I don't want to say achievement, but there's this excitement and love that is given so many times during these NDEs from the other side, right? Almost like this
Right.
grand like re-entering or and who knows with your dogs, maybe once your puppy went over to the other side, it was like this, wow, you did a great job over there. And then they transform into what they transform into.
Right.
But it's just so many routes, so many things that are going on. But this has been an amazing conversation. I did mention this last time when we talked because you do all this work. I always like to let people know when I'm speaking with different guests, like where people find you. Are you, I don't recall if you're online or if you have services online or where
Mhm.
people find your information.
Yeah, they can go to my website, which is cheneefournier.com. And I do offer mediumship readings. I offer angel and spirit guide channeled readings. One of the things I also love getting to do is mentoring people so that they can do this work for themselves. If they really get, skillful at it and they want to share it with others, they can. Because I love that concept of, you can either give someone some vegetables and they'll eat for one meal, or you can teach them to farm and they can feed themselves for, in perpetuity while we're still here physically.
Mm.
So I love getting to do all of that. I also, one of the beautiful things that I recently started doing, it's probably been about 6 months now, but for me, that's recent. I was guided by my higher self and my team of light, my angels and spirit guides, to start offering what's called GRAND Attunements. And so for me, GRAND stands for the gift of remembering our angelic nature and divinity. So I'm not attuning someone to their angelic nature and their divinity, but I'm attuning them to help them remember. Because so many people that I interact with, whether it be through the work that I do or just out in public or I hear conversations, they don't believe that they're divine.
Mm.
They really think that they're flawed. And that's, religious concepts can really impose that upon people and make people think that they're flawed. So for me, it's just this process of attuning them to that remembrance of who they are, who each one of us is deep inside, no matter what kind of cultural conditionings have been put upon us, no matter religious conditionings or teachings, underneath it all, we are sovereign beings. And we're beautiful and we're holy and we're sacred, and we just have to remember that. And then what I notice is that when people get attuned to that, they look different. They, by the time we're off of the Zoom call with each other, they're sitting differently. Sometimes they're crying because they're like, oh my gosh, Chenee, I believe you. And I'm like, you don't have to believe me, believe yourself, believe what you're feeling. So yeah, all of my services are offered online. And I'm also going to be a panelist at an upcoming online conference through Spiritual Awakenings International. And they were started by people who used to be on the board of IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And I was able to host something for IANS back in August in Arizona. So I'm starting to do a lot more of that sort of stuff too, where I'm participating in conferences and sharing my story and just sharing my love for this. Because some people think, oh, isn't spiritual awakening hard and challenging? And I'm like, well, if you think it is, it can be. But if you're like, no, it doesn't have to be hard and challenging, it can be beautiful, because you're shedding these belief systems that constricted you. And when you shed the belief systems that constricted you, oh my gosh, you can breathe deeper, you can believe in your own divinity, and you can see all these things around you that you were missing before. Not because you changed your frequency, but because you started opening your eyes and watching for these things that are signs and symbols.
And the question I always go with, and I probably asked you this before. Let's see what comes out this time. It's not recorded anyways, right? It was a sit down between you and I having that
Right.
conversation. But it was really just, and it can be brief, and it's just whatever comes from your heart. But the main reason why we incarnate into this earthly realm, if there's something that is divine that comes to you that way.
So I'm going to give the same answer I gave last time, which is, for me, I do not answer that question for other people. I can only say why I incarnated here. And for me, incarnation in general is a beautiful mystery. And all sorts of things come with that. And one of the most powerful and empowering things to do when you're given a mystery is to work it out for yourself. So I try not to even give that answer, because over the course of my life, throughout my life, I've probably would have had 10 different answers for that. So now I just think, you know what? For now, I'm just going to say it's a giant mystery for each one of us to figure out and cultivate that answer within our own selves.
I've loved this. I love the answer as well. We can leave it like that and let our audience kind of just, if they're listening to this late in the evening, they can kind of try to fall asleep with that in their mind or try to contemplate why they're here. But thank you so much, Chenee, for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank
This has been an
you.
amazing conversation. And I always turn to the audience and say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe. Please hit the like button. It really helps the algorithm tell YouTube that it likes our channel, and you guys are part of the Soul Inspired family, and it helps me get amazing people like Chenee on. And I encourage you to follow her if you liked the information she gave. But I'll see you next time on the Soul Inspired. So